I can't believe this.
All right, hello everyone. 41wrestling.com. This is Bill Apter down here.
I can't believe this.
At Apter's Alley, and as you know, Craig Peters.
I can't believe this. Oh, come on.
Craig Peters, one of the old editors of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, and so many other London publishing magazines, was down here several months ago plugging this book, Is Wrestling Fixed?
No, I didn't know it was broken.
And I got a knock on the door here at Apter's Alley from someone who just caught that video and said,
"What? What? I don't believe this."
Yeah, he didn't believe that he was not invited here at Apter's Alley, but he got his GPS. He found this. Bob Smith, welcome down to
Just
Apter's
to prove
Alley.
that I do exist for all you guys who read the magazine all those years. And
wait a minute, you're not one of the 8 characters that I allegedly wrote in the magazines?
No.
You're not any of them?
No, I was.
Wow. You're not Matt Brock?
No.
No, you're not Liz Hunter?
No.
Wow, you're not Ann Shockett?
No.
Eddie Elner?
No.
Wow.
I'm Bob Smith, who old-timer wrestlers go, the steel cage! You wrote the steel cage!
That's right, you wrote the steel cage, I remember that.
Then I helped them with their colostomy bags, but anyway.
That was Inside Wrestling.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
No, that was Peter, wasn't that PWI?
I know. Yes, you're right, it was Pro Wrestling
I had a column
Illustrated.
in Inside, too, and I don't remember what it was called.
You did, On the Road. Was that yours?
No.
No, it wasn't. Oh,
God.
Well, we're having... it's been a long time.
Is Baron Mikel Cicluna still a tag team champion?
Actually, I have a piece of memorabilia from Baron. Is there a pencil laying here on the table?
You have a Baron Mikel Cicluna?
Yeah, a pencil. I got a pencil. But anyway, you came down here and you had one of my books.
I have to tell you, folks, and this is... I'm in no way associated with this book.
By the way, we will get tons of... comments here on YouTube, not letters like we used to in the old days that people telling us which magazine the columns were. So.
Yes, they will. They'll correct us, and I know you'll correct us because I know half of you guys anyway.
So.
But when I heard this book was coming out, I just flipped. I saw the art design, which is fantastic. It brings back the flavor of the classic wrestling magazines. The reason I wanted to be a wrestling writer was those magazines, and. Met Bill Apter years before we worked together. This is absolutely the most enjoyable read of 2015. If you're into wrestling at all, if you're a lifelong fan of wrestling like I am, don't miss it. It's cheap at twice the price. I'm telling you, it's an easy, digestible read. It's funny. It's digestible. Like fibrous, it's got fiber.
You said cheap at twice the price?
The paper, it's got plenty of fiber.
Yeah, it does.
But in all seriousness...
It's healthy to read. It's got fiber.
It's funny. There's a lot of love in this book, and don't miss it. And I'm not saying it because I'm mentioned 3 times, which I am. But
you are.
But it is a great, great wrestling book. It's #1 right now at Amazon.com under the wrestling category, and well-deserved.
Thank you very
well-deserved.
much. We had great times back in the classic days of the wrestling magazines. How many years did you work for
I would
the company?
say, as I recall, in Stu Sachs and the others, I'm assuming it was just sort of short of 7 years.
Or sort of 7 years. Yes.
Around 6 to 8 years. I'm old. I don't remember specifically. I don't remember the dates. I just remember doing the PW 500.
Well, I was going to say, I was going to reveal to the people out there watching this that Bob Smith was the guy who was the very first person to start off as a normal person and then become a raving maniac after several days because he was given the assignment of writing all the little capsule career profiles of the PWI 500, starting from #1 all the way through number 500. Tell us about the day. We all know, that how this happened. How we sat and discussed in a conference room that we were going to do 500 wrestlers, and I think you had mentioned that because of was it the Forbes 500?
It was either the Forbes 500 or the Inc. 500. Yeah. And I remember we all enjoyed that type of thing. We thought it was made for a great magazine.
Yeah, we did.
So we said, it was originally going to be the PWI 100, as I recall.
That's right.
And then we talked about that factor, how the other magazines were doing 500, and I made the mistake of saying, that doesn't sound so hard. Well, I got to tell you, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in all these years in magazines and newspapers that I've worked for. It took weeks of staying into the office till about midnight.
Now, I compared him with, if any of you old horror movie fans, or if you saw the remake of The Wolfman several years ago, Larry Talbot was a really nice guy. Everybody got along with him. But when the full moon came up and he turned into the Wolfman, this was him. They started out as nice, normal Bob Smith.
Yeah.
And could you show us your face, what it would look like around 2 days later?
You mean starting the Peter Rifle and realize
Yeah.
I've gotten 12 names on it in 2
Yes,
days?
yeah. What was your face like at that point? Yeah, it was. So he would the next.
Gilly, don't bother me.
Right, we would pass by his desk at lunchtime.
Get out!
He'd have a sandwich, and he'd say, "Hey, Bob, what are you eating?" Not now.
Yeah.
Bob's eating not now again.
This is not a lie. This is exactly what it was. It was a massive undertaking. We're using archaic computographic publishing system that we had at that point.
Back then,
which
yeah.
back then was really the state of the art, but it's not like even the desktop publishing we do now. And we had a glitch. I think we accidentally left out the end of letter G into the early letter H or something.
I remember Terry Gordy
got left out.
He was pretty upset.
And but I will say this: I am proud of the work I did in laying the foundation for that, because to this day, I think it's the most talked about thing. One of the 5 most talked about things that wrestling magazines have ever done.
Oh, absolutely.
I think the wrestlers were either into it or hated it, which is a good thing. And I think that the fans enjoy it, and that's what we were there for.
But now you were uncontrollably angry by the end of that. But part two of this was what I had to endure. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
I was the guy, even though Bob Smith wrote all this. Let me explain. We would all go into a room in the morning and discuss for the whole day, like, who was going to be in the first 200. After that, we'd go, take care of it, Bob, because he was Mr. Indy.
I used to like covering everything from Memphis to the lowest indies.
Yeah.
I was really into that part of wrestling.
So we knew that he knew all these guys, and we just trusted, hey, Bob will take care of it. So I would go out in the field, and a lot of these indie guys who I didn't know, and a lot of the top guys in the top 10 would say, who the hell wrote this about me? I was put number 329 when number 328, Kojiki Samuto from Japan, isn't as good as me. This was nothing unusual, because there were top name wrestlers in the top 20 that were, if a guy was number 19 and the other guy was number 20, and I'm not going to reveal these names at all, these people were ready to kill me. So I'd say, listen, I was part of the deciding factor, but there were like 8 other editors in there, and you have to understand, my word is not final. Why not? You're out here. We see you, we don't see these other guys, and you're probably all these other guys. You are not any other guys.
Well, I'll take that a step further. Even our regular rankings, the regular ratings, and I worked on those too, the regular top 10s. That was my job for years at the magazines. And I will say
Well,
this,
you and I actually did that together, because I called the offices.
a wrestler who many people think is the greatest world champion of all time,
Yeah,
and I'm not going to mention his name,
yeah.
was at a point where he was doing tag teams for just a spell, which lowered him in the overall top 10.
Of course, because he was a tag team guy at that point.
Well, the guy barely knew me. He came up to me and said, how did I go from number 2 to number 8?
Yeah.
This is one of the 5 biggest names in the history of wrestling.
Well,
coming up to a schmo like me and going, I don't like my ranking this issue.
They do that as soon as they find out that you're associated with the magazine. It was very important to them. Now, what I was driving at over there is a lot of times you and I clashed over the rankings, because I was sitting there every Monday calling the offices, and then I needed an editor to look over this, and you were following the business, and you questioned me about, well, why is that guy number 3? Why isn't he number 2?
Right.
And we'd be like, so it was never
personal.
Right, but it was never a rose garden.
No.
Was it?
But it was a blast.
Yeah.
It was a blast. We had a blast. I loved doing the rating. And my thought of the rating is that wrestling, I'm going to take flack for this, I wrote it. I'm an agate guy when it comes to newspapers. I like the meat and potatoes, the actual facts. Wrestling was to be covered like a sport.
That's what we did.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
And that's what the ratings were. If you lost, you went down. If you won, you went up.
Correct.
A pinfall loss meant more than a countout loss or a disqualification. So it was everything that happened was actually metered into what we thought was a logical rating system, just like our sister boxing magazines did at that point.
Do you remember that some of the top promoters in the business calling me and getting very upset about the rankings?
Sure. I can recall when Jerry Lawler was AWA World Champion.
Yeah.
At the cusp when he won that championship, he would go to Continental, he would go to Philadelphia on an indie show, and he would defend the card all over the country. He would defend his title, all over the country.
Yeah.
So for one issue, Jerry Lawler was the number one ranked wrestler in the world.
Correct.
The flag we got for
that.
that.
Oh, I remember that. That guy, all he does is wrestle in Memphis, and oh, God, I do.
I remember the Big Two having a cow, because it was like, Jerry Lawler, he hadn't wrestled for them. You know, he wasn't even associated with them. And here, this, the Memphis champion, as everybody liked to call him, suddenly was number one in rank. Well, he just beat Kurt Hennig, too.
Yeah. So what are your some of your other memories of being with the wrestling magazines?
Well, I left at the time when our former publisher, Stanley Weston, God rest his soul, decided to sell the company.
Yeah.
Back then, it was, oh God, we're going to age ourselves. It was pre-email. I couldn't file stories from anything but Pony Express. I'm from upstate New York originally, and I love New York City. I love the whole surrounding area. I like Long Island, Queens.
Me too.
I wanted to stay there. I did not want to move with the company, which later moved to Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Ambler, Pennsylvania?
Ambler for Washington Broad
Right.
Axe.
Right. And nothing against them.
And I'm
but
still here.
At that point, I wanted to stay where I was. So
Yeah.
I went on to other jobs and other things.
But you were also, you stayed in the business. You did broadcasting, because you and I did a lot of work with Mario Savoldi's promotion.
I'm a trivia question to a lot of people, or trivia answer, in that the very first Eastern Championship Wrestling regular television program, the host wasn't Joey Styles, it was me with Todd Gordon.
Yeah.
And that, you all know what happened to Eastern Championship Wrestling, right, Bill?
It got like dubbed EC Dub or
EC
something?
Dub, yes. And I want to tell you folks, I say this with all humbleness, I stunk. I was the worst play-by-play announcer
I thought he was pretty
of all. No, I was not good. I just, I did it a few times, and they were keeping me. They didn't tell me to go home, but I just smelt the grease paint falling off my face, and I said, you know what, get somebody better. And I am so happy that I did that, because you know why? Eventually, our friend,
An
the
intern
great guys
at
in wrestling,
PWI.
Joey Styles, came to our offices, and I remember him having a long conversation with this impresario named Paul Heyman.
Yeah, I remember
And the
that
next
guy.
thing you know, Joey Styles is one of the greatest wrestling announcers of all time. In my mind, I think yours too.
And well, what,
He
all
succeeded
I can
everybody.
say that's a true story, and all I can say about that is, oh my God! So let's move fast forward now. Tell everybody what you're doing these days.
Well, I don't like to brag on myself. I had a tremendous music career.
You
When
did?
I left PWI,
Under what name though? It was a different.
Robert Charles, and I toured the country for
And
15
Charles was spelled differently.
ELS.
Yes.
CHARELS. All the records are still in print. If you want to go look it up, I can prove it. Ha. I made 4 albums. Got to tour, perform with B.B. King. I was a blues singer, and we did great. I was interviewed. Did you know I was interviewed on the House of Blues Radio Hour by none other than Dan Aykroyd himself?
I did not.
Yes.
I
And I
did not.
performed at the Chicago Blues Festival twice, and performed 10 times with the great B.B. King.
I did not know.
So I really got the music bug, and I lived out my dreams. And it's only a few years ago I decided just to put that aside for a while. But I did that for 15 years, between about 1995 to about 2007. I was really heavily involved in music.
Okay.
But that music career led to what I'm doing now, which is I am essentially the editor of an entertainment newspaper in Long Island. It comes out every 2 weeks. So we just do the whole entertainment scene in Long Island, and
And what's that called?
it's called Good Times.
Yeah.
Anybody in the New York region knows Good Times, and
And we had a lot of them together.
yes, we did. We had a blast. I remember. Do you remember the Kyle Auditorium?
Kiel.
Keel going to St. Louis
Yes, of course.
for one of the NWA's pay-per-views.
Of course, of course.
I forget what it was. It was like a tag team tournament. I forget. My mind is fuzzy.
No, but I do remember that that trip. That was, and I was just in.
Those are back in the
St.
days
Louis
when you could
area.
take a red eye and there was 9 people on the plane.
Yeah,
You remember
exactly.
that? It was
exactly.
awesome.
Right,
I've
and
never had such an
eight of
enjoyable
them
ride.
were the wrestler and Inside Wrestling staff.
Yeah, those were the days. The stewardess would come. If you guys want to lay down, you can just lay across the 3 seats. Could you imagine?
Right, and you didn't have to pay for food. Would you like some chicken?
Yeah.
Well, listen, I would love to invite you to please come down for another memory share here at Apter's Alley.
I would love it.
Where can people find you?
Where can you?
Are you on social media?
I'm on Twitter.
What is your Twitter handle, baby?
What is it? The little @ symbol Bahumba 2011.
Spell it.
BAHOOMBA 2011.
See, I said spell it. It's the old joke.
But
you didn't
yeah,
do.
I guess it's the
No, you did the ad sign. No, I was saying.
Bahumba 2011.
Hey, he's
on
he's
Twitter.
passing the joke by. I said
Bahumba
spell
was
it.
the name of a record label I ran.
That's right.
And Bahumba, people said, "What does that mean?" I said, "It means nothing." And they said, "Where'd you get it from?" It was comedian Tony Rosato on SCTV.
Is that right?
Made up the word Bahumba, and did a little pelvic thrust. And I thought it was the funniest thing I'd
I
ever
never knew
seen.
where it came from.
And I called my blues label that because I wanted to look proper in the store next to Shanachie and Arhoolie. Those were real labels. So
Great stuff.
Shanachie, Bahumba, and Arhoolie. It sounds perfect.
During all the time that you were with the magazines, if I can ask you, which we know wasn't the PWI 500, but what was your favorite? You know, like with me, people come over and ask me, and I always tell them it's the Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler story.
Right.
What's your favorite story of something you were involved in?
This is going to sound really sappy, but this is true.
Sap
It was
out.
the day I got hired.
Really?
I don't think I've ever been so happy in my entire life. I was one of those kids like Joey Styles talks about in the book, who you had what little money you had, you spent it on wrestling magazines. That was me. That's where I learned about Freddie Blassie in the 70s when I grew up, and that's where I learned about Abdullah the Butcher, and that's where I learned about Ric Flair, and it's where I learned about the guys who weren't on East Coast TV. I learned about through the magazines. And I remember meeting Bill Apter at the Washington Avenue Armory in Albany, New York. He took a famous cover, which was Superstar Billy Graham and Tony Gurria.
I remember that very well.
I think it was for Inside Wrestling at
Yes,
that point.
yeah.
Beautiful picture, one of the best he ever took.
Wow, thank you.
And I was really into it, even into my adult years. Oh, geez, don't do that. Even into my adult years, I bought the wrestling magazines. I remember being sick with the flu and walking to a drugstore to pick up the latest PWI. I was really into the books. And back then, believe it or not, I got the job through a New York Times classified ad.
Yeah.
And-
Who hired you at the company?
I guess Stu Saxton?
Was it Stu Sachs at that point?
Yeah, Stu and Craig, maybe?
Yeah.
I remember you all sat me in a room and you
Yeah.
all interviewed me. It wasn't
We
just
did.
one guy.
We did.
But
I interviewed him differently, though.
But I
did if you were wrestling so-and-so tonight, I did a wrestling.
But I think what got me the job was the article I wrote. They made you write a test article.
Yes, right.
And the article was about something going on with Sergeant Slaughter getting jobbed in a match, and write an article around that. And I said, "Oh, this is for me." And I sat down. I named everybody: Wally Carbo, and the really nuts
Everybody
and
in the
bolts
AWA,
guys,
yeah.
and I think I referenced Gene LaBelle from California at one point, making a quote, and they all went, "Boy."
Yeah, I remember this now.
And I will say this: I knew a lot about wrestling just walking in there, and it made the job. I think the guys respected me for my coworkers because
We did.
I really knew the stuff. I needed to be led down a promoted path. I was a newspaper writer before that, so my writing wasn't the
But you
florid
came from that
style.
background because Stu Sachs also came from newspaper background.
Yeah,
so it was
most
the
of
right
us
way to
did.
go.
So many of our guys went on to great careers too.
Yeah, they did. They did. There's so many doing so many great things now.
Oh, some of them. Some of you real sports fans. Kostya Kennedy, who is now a best-selling sports writer and Sports Illustrated writer, worked for a wrestling
He
magazine.
did, and Al Bello, the great photographer, I hired, and he went on to work for Getty Images and Sports
Gersh
Illustrated.
Kunstman went on to work for both the New York Daily News and the New York
He's
Post
still there.
in an executive editor position.
Yeah, Gary Morgenstein is one of the major publicists at Sci-Fi currently, and SmackDown is on
Yeah.
Sci-Fi.
But I remember one great moment at the office. I'm talking to Dave Rosenbaum, one of our other famous writers.
Was he real?
I didn't know he was broken. No. but I'm talking to Dave, and Dave wanted to be, I think Dave wanted to be a sports writer, just a general sports writer.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Don't you want to be a sports writer?" And I remember you stood there when I said this to him. I said, "Dave, I want to be a wrestling writer." And you looked at me like, that's the coolest answer I've ever heard. Because to me, wrestling was my thing. I really loved it. And there was no going up. I was exactly where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
I really was. And I'm sorry it ever came to an end. I never envisioned a day there'd be a world without wrestling magazines that look like this. Because this was such a part of my youth, such an enjoyable, one-of-a-kind entertainment forum for anybody into sports entertainment.
Yeah.
And I'll say this publicly, I was blessed to be part of it for so many years. And you know I worked for other magazines after I left PWI?
I do. I
I
remember
worked
that.
for the great Sandy Krebs, hi Sandy, wherever you are,
Yeah.
for Wrestling's Main Event. I worked for Colin Bowman at two different stages of WCW.
magazines.
It seems like every time I left wrestling, my phone would ring.
And you also worked at a couple of dirty magazines.
I didn't know they were broken.
Thank you. By the way, one of the great headlines of all time, I remember Bob Smith wrote. Do you remember when you wrote that?
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah, but
We're,
it never came to my table, unfortunately.
Is that right?
Yeah, I wanted
Darn
it, but I ordered it, but they never
Darn
got
it.
No.
Darn it. Bob Smith, this was an absolute pleasure. I wish we had more time.
I am telling you, folks,
My pal.
it's wonderful to have friends like this. I'm having a blast. Just
They don't see what's going on
we could do
underneath the
we could
table
do this.
here.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's fine. At least it's not what happened to Triple H on that one show. Oh,
This is what's going on underneath the table.
they say wrestling has gone to the dogs. Here's proof.
Yes, Lexi Rose loves to be on camera here.
Upstaged
So,
again. Story of my life.
Sir Bob Smith, let's all point out to the camera there and go, we'll see you.
See you.
I can't use the finger right now because Lexi's on me, so hang on. By the way, no harm has come to this dog.
No,
Because
during the
that's
taping.
my baby.
Let's do
We'll
it.
see you
At
the matches. You know, Randy Gordon says I stole that.